If you ever drove past Victoria Island on a weekday morning, you'd probably have noticed the massive glass towers of Aditayo conglomerate, shining like a mirror under the Lagos sun, standing tall like it owned the sky. And in truth, it kind of did. The man behind it all, Adeoluwa Adetayo, wasn't just a big man in business, he was the man. Billionaire, CEO, only son of Chief and Madam Adetayo, Prince of Power and Fortune. He had everything: money, fame, influence, property scattered across Lagos, from Lekki Phase 1 to Banana Island. His convoy of cars could stop traffic. His phone never stopped buzzing. People stood up when he entered a room. They clapped when he gave a speech. Some even bowed. To the outside world, Adeoluwa was living the dream. But what most people didn't know was that he was also living alone. Inside his mansion in Ikoyi, 5 bedrooms, high ceilings, chandeliers, more space than a man could ever use, Adeoluwa would often sit in silence. The house was cold, not from the AC, but from emptiness. No laughter, no footsteps, just quiet. Too quiet. Some nights he'd stand by the glass balcony on the top floor, staring at the Lagos skyline while sipping water. Not wine, not champagne, just water. Because even with all he had, peace was missing. His parents were always abroad, attending high-level meetings and conferences. His friends, most were either business partners or hangers-on. And the women, the women, models, actresses, influencers, beautiful faces, empty intentions. They loved the lifestyle, spa dates in Dubai, diamond bracelets, soft life, but none of them truly saw him. Then came Sandra, a lawyer, polished, intelligent, and poised. She was different, or so he thought. For the first time in years, Adeoluwa let someone into his heart. He bought her a ring, not just any ring, this one came from a private designer in Italy, custom made with a blue diamond center. He was ready to marry, to settle down, to stop being alone. But fate had other plans. It was a Tuesday morning. Rain had just stopped falling and the sky was still gray. Adeoluwa arrived early at his Lekki office. He wasn't expected until later, but something told him to show up. No driver, no entourage, just him. As he pushed the glass door to his office suite open, he heard low laughter, a soft giggle, then a man's voice, familiar. He walked in slowly. There, standing by the edge of his desk, was Sandra. And beside her, laughing like they were at a comedy show, was Sola, his chief financial officer, one of his most trusted staff. They weren't just chatting. Sola had his hand around her waist, her head was on his shoulder, and then, as Adeoluwa stood frozen, she reached up and kissed Sola on the cheek. They hadn't even noticed him yet. He didn't say a word. He didn't shout or ask questions. He just turned around, walked out, and left the building. That night, he didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, still in the same clothes, staring at nothing. The betrayal wasn't just about love. It was about trust, about being seen as nothing more than a wallet, even by someone he thought would become his wife. The next day, the engagement was called off. Sandra didn't even deny it. "I didn't think you'd find out like that," she had said casually over the phone. Sola was fired immediately. Security escorted him out, but the damage had been done. Adeoluwa locked himself inside the mansion for days. Not even Morenike, his assistant, could get him to come out. He ignored calls, ignored meetings, ignored life. The house stayed dark. The rooms remained empty. He would walk from one room to another like a ghost, looking at pictures from years past, wondering what went wrong. Then one night the rain returned, heavy and loud like a warning from the sky. Thunder rumbled across the lagoon. Adeoluwa stood by his window again, watching the lightning flash, and with a voice barely above a whisper, he said to himself, "Can anyone ever love me for me? Not the name, not the money, not the empire. Just me?" That question haunted him for hours, and somewhere between the cracks of thunder and the sound of his own heartbeat, an idea came. A wild one, a brave one. He picked up his phone and called Morinike. The call rang twice before she answered, confused. "Sir," she said, voice soft. "I need old clothes," he said. "Torn jeans, a plain t-shirt, no labels, and slippers." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, what are you talking about?" "No cars, no watch, no perfume, nothing rich of my, he added. "I want to look like I have nothing." Morinike stayed silent for a moment. Then finally she said, "Okay, sir, I understand." And just like that, the Prince of Lagos began a journey that would change everything. Not with his title and not with his money, but with his heart. Lagos didn't slow down for anyone. From the shiny glass towers of Ikoyi to the sweaty chaos of Oshodi, the city moved like it was always in a hurry. And somewhere between the speed of the world and the silence of his heart, Adeoluwa Adetayo, the billionaire everyone admired, was quietly disappearing. He didn't tell anyone, not even his parents in London. They were busy anyway, attending business conferences and rubbing shoulders with foreign investors. All he told Morinike was, "Help me vanish." And Morinike, ever loyal, didn't ask why. She just said, "Yes, sir." She showed up the next day with a black nylon bag. Inside, 2 faded t-shirts, a pair of old jeans with a small tear near the knee, rubber slippers with worn soles, and a plain hoodie that smelled faintly of mothballs. "You sure about this?" she asked gently. Adeoluwa stood in front of his giant bathroom mirror. His beard was already growing out, thicker than usual, rough around the edges. His usually clean-cut hair had started curling at the sides. "Yes," he said, "I'm sure." That evening under the fading orange sky, he removed his designer clothes and packed a small backpack, only the basics. No phone calls, no branded cologne, no wristwatch, not even a wallet, just enough money for survival. He left the mansion before sunrise. The staff thought he had traveled for a quiet retreat. No one knew where he was going, only Morinike. And even she didn't know everything Adeoluwa didn't take the SUV. He walked through his gated estate in Ikoyi, past the security post, and into the real world. He blended in so well that the guards at the estate gate didn't even glance twice. He made his way to Mushin, one of the busiest, most chaotic parts of Lagos mainland. The air smelled of fried akara and burning wood. Horns blared. Okadas zipped through traffic like angry wasps. Children played barefoot near open gutters. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. And that was what he wanted, real life. He found a small room in a compound where the landlord barely looked up when he paid 3 months' rent in cash. The room was tiny. The window had no curtain. The mattress on the floor smelled like dust and old sweat. The walls were cracked, and a single naked bulb hung from the ceiling. He sat on the bed, took a long breath, and whispered, "This is it." Every day after that, Adeoluwa walked the streets like a man starting from zero. He shaved less, let his hair grow out wild. His skin darkened slightly under the sun. The slippers slapped against his heels as he walked, from one corner of Mushin to another, looking for small jobs. And Lagos, being Lagos, didn't care who he used to be. He pushed wheelbarrows at the market, helped load planks at sawmills, sometimes washed cars by hand for N500. The pay was little, the work was hard. His fingers developed blisters. His back ached. But his heart, for the first time in years, it felt lighter. No one asked for selfies. No one bowed or smiled fake smiles. Most people didn't even look him in the eye. At night, he'd return to his room, dust on his clothes, sweat soaked into his shirt. He'd sit on the edge of the mattress, his knees aching, and look at the torn calendar hanging on the wall. He never turned on the light. The darkness helped him think. One night he whispered to himself, "Can anyone love a man like this?" Not a billionaire. Not the CEO of anything. Just a man. The next morning he got a call from Morinike. She spoke quickly, like she was afraid someone was listening. "I've created 3 new dating profiles," she said. "Each one tells the same story. You're a man who had a good life but lost everything. You're now starting over. No job title, no surname, just Deolu." That's what I put on the app. Adeolua smiled faintly. "Good. No photos? Only one. You, sitting on that bench under the bridge. I blurred your face a bit. You're thorough." "I'm worried." "Don't be." He ended the call and stood up. Outside, the day was already heating up. The market was loud. The air was thick with smoke from roasted corn stands and exhaust fumes. This was his new world now. He didn't want to be a prince here. He wanted to be nobody until someone saw him as somebody. He tied a small scarf around his head, tucked his phone deep into his old backpack, and stepped into the crowd. The plan had started. The billionaire prince was now just Deolu, and somewhere in the noise of Lagos he was searching, not for money, not for fame, but for a heart that could love without asking for anything in return. Mushin mornings had a rhythm of their own. Shouts from pepper sellers, the rattle of Danfo buses warming up for the day, the chorus of generators humming to life. But that particular Thursday morning felt different for Adeolua as he stood by a kiosk, sipping lukewarm sachet water. His heart beat a little faster. Today was his first blind date. Not as Adeoluwa Adetayo, the billionaire prince of Ikoyi, just Deolu, a man who once had something but lost it all. Thanks to Morinike, 3 different profiles had been set up on a popular dating app. Each one told the same story. Honest, humble, former business owner, now finding his feet again. No surname, no mention of his empire, just a quiet photo of him on a worn-out bench under the Echo Bridge, wearing his faded hoodie. And yet, women still responded. Morinike had carefully selected 3 of them, one for each of the next 3 evenings. All were based in Lagos. None knew who he really was. None had ever heard of Adetayo conglomerate. That was the point. The first woman was named Tolu. She was a fashion influencer on Instagram with over 100,000 followers. She agreed to meet him at a small buka in Yaba. That evening, Adeolua arrived early. He wore his cleanest shirt, still faded but not torn, and rubber slippers. The buka was modest. Plastic chairs, zinc roof, the smell of jollof rice and fried plantain in the air, the kind of place he'd never have entered in his old life. Tolu walked in 15 minutes late. Tall, flawless skin, high heels clicking sharply against the pavement. Her makeup was perfect, her nails long and sparkling. She stopped, looked around once, spotted him, then looked around again, clearly hoping it was a mistake. "You're the one?" she asked, wrinkling her nose. Adeolua stood politely and smiled. "Yes, thank you for coming." She sat slowly, adjusting her dress like the chair was covered in disease. "You really brought me here?" she asked, glancing at the ceiling fan struggling to turn. I like the food, he said quietly. Tolu laughed, not kindly, loud, almost mockingly. I can't do this. You should have told me you were still recovering. Adeolua stayed calm. I just wanted somewhere quiet. You want quiet? Go to your village, she said, grabbing her designer handbag. Next time, try to look like someone who owns a mirror. She walked out before the waitress could even bring water. Adeolua sat there for a while, staring at the plate of rice he had already ordered. The steam rose gently, the suya meat still sizzling beside it. But he had no appetite. He paid for both meals and walked back home under the streetlights, his slippers slapping against the pavement, the city moving past him without a care. The second date came 2 days later. Her name was Bisi, a lawyer based in Ikeja. They met at a roadside food spot just outside Computer Village. The place was buzzing. Hawkers shouting, cars honking, fried yams sizzling on iron pans. Bisi arrived in a navy blue suit and block heels. She was direct from the start. You said you do manual labor? She asked, not even greeting him properly. Yes, Adeolua replied, folding his hands on the table. What kind of work exactly? Anything available. I push loads, clean shops, help mechanics. Depends. Daily pay or weekly? Mostly daily, he said. She pulled out a small notebook from her handbag and began writing. Ever been married? How many siblings? Where are your parents? What's your educational background? What LGA are you from? Adeolua blinked. Why all the questions? She looked up serious. I'm not here for vibes, please. I need a serious man, one that can bounce back. I'm not trying to suffer. He nodded. I understand. She didn't touch the food she ordered. She took one last look at him and stood up. I'll call you, she said, her voice flat. She never did. By the time he walked back to Mushin that night, his legs were aching and his heart heavier than before. The third woman's name was Lade. She seemed sweet online. Said she loved humble men. Told Morenike she grew up in a struggling home and had a soft spot for people trying to start over. Their date was at a small amala joint in Agege. The place was smoky and hot, but the food was fire. They talked. She smiled. She touched his arm playfully, said things like, You're really deep, and I like that you're so grounded. For a moment, Adeolua let himself hope. Then the next morning, he got a text. Hey, love, I didn't want to ask, but I'm in a really tough spot. My rent expired, and I've not eaten since yesterday. Even small help would mean the world to me. I really believe in us. He stared at the message. Not even 24 hours after meeting him. His hands trembled slightly. His throat tightened. He didn't reply. That night he sat outside his small room in Mushin. The street was quiet. A group of children played nearby, their laughter echoing in the humid air. Somewhere in the distance, a generator rattled. He leaned back against the wall, staring up at the cracked ceiling of his compound. Maybe Morenike was wrong. Maybe love didn't exist. Maybe he didn't exist. To these women, he was just a wallet waiting to open, even when he said he had nothing. He covered his face with his hands and sighed deeply. The pain wasn't from being rejected. It was from realizing that even now, stripped of title and wealth, he was still just a fantasy to be used, not a man to be loved. But a part of him still whispered, Keep going? Maybe, just maybe, there was still someone out there. Someone who would see beyond the dirt on his clothes, beyond the quiet voice and empty pockets. Someone who would see him. The skies over Lagos had been threatening rain all day. By evening, the threat finally made good on its promise. It wasn't the kind of soft drizzle that made lovers walk under umbrellas. It was hard, angry rain, the kind that beat rooftops like drums and sent people running for cover, shouting and grabbing at clothes left outside. Streets in Surulere began to flood in patches. The gutters bubbled over. Kiki drivers leaned forward, squinting through their windshields as wipers danced furiously. And in the middle of all this, sitting quietly beneath a leaking zinc shade outside a rundown tailor shop, was Adeolua. His hoodie was soaked. The sleeves of his shirt clung to his skin. His slippers were covered in sand and rainwater. His small nylon bag, his only possession, rested by his feet, half torn, with some akara crumbs still inside Ra. People passed him. Some glanced. Most didn't. He was invisible again. The cold had started to get to him. He sniffed. His teeth clattered. He rubbed his hands together, trying to trap what little warmth was left in his bones. Then she appeared. She wasn't loud. She didn't scream or act dramatic. She just walked calmly under a pink umbrella, wearing a simple lilac blouse, black trousers, and blue plastic slippers. Her hair was wrapped in a neat scarf. In her other hand, she held a black nylon bag, the kind people use to carry food from home. She stopped in her tracks when she saw him. For a second, he braced himself, expecting the usual. A snub, a judgmental look, maybe a quick selfie and a fake smile, but this time was different. Her eyes didn't carry pity. They carried concern. "You're getting wet," she said gently. He looked up. She didn't flinch at the mess he was. She stepped forward instead. Before he could say a word, she opened the bag in her hand and brought out a small food container. "It's rice and beans," she said. "I made it for myself, but please eat. You look hungry." He stared at her, speechless. No one had offered him anything like that, not without wanting something in return. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a folded wrapper. "This is dry," she said, wrapping it gently over his shoulders. "Use it. The cold can kill someone like this." Adeolua was still silent. "Thank you," he whispered, barely audible. She smiled, soft, warm, the kind that reached her eyes. "I'm Timmy Lady," she said. "I sew clothes. I also teach nursery kids not far from here." He managed a small nod. "I'm Deolu, just trying to survive." "I can see that," she said, crouching slightly so they were closer in height. "Life hasn't been kind lately, has it?" "No," he said honestly. "Not really." She looked around. "If you want, you can stay in my shop till the rain stops. It's not big, but it's dry. I'll be sewing anyway." He blinked. "You don't even know me." "I don't need to know your story to show kindness," she replied. For a moment, he just sat there, unsure. But her voice, her face, it wasn't fake. It wasn't forced. It felt safe. He stood slowly and followed her into the shop. The tailor's space was tiny, barely wide enough for two people to move around freely. Rolls of fabric leaned against the wall. A Singer sewing machine sat on a wooden table. Plastic buckets of thread, zippers, and buttons were scattered neatly around. The floor was clean. A small socket-powered kettle hummed softly from the corner. Timilade plugged it in again. "I'll make tea. It helps with cold." He stood quietly, still wrapped in her dry wrapper, unsure where to place himself. She handed him a towel. "Here, you can dry your face." As he patted his cheeks and wiped the water from his neck, he noticed the calendar on her wall, an old one still stuck on April, though it was already August. Temilade handed him a warm plastic cup. "Careful, it's hot." He took it with both hands. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," she said with a small smile, "but I wanted to." They sat in silence for a while. The rain pounded the roof steadily. The shop lights flickered as the small generator in the compound groaned. "Finally," he asked, "you do this for everyone?" She shook her head. "No, but you looked like someone who needed one good day." His chest tightened at those words. One good day. That night, Adeolua didn't return to his dusty mattress in Mushin. He stayed seated on a small stool beside Temilade's sewing table, helping her fold pieces of Ankara, threading the machine occasionally, watching as she stitched clothes with a patient rhythm. The way she moved, the way she hummed, like someone who had learned to find peace in small places. Hours passed. Neither of them noticed. At some point, she looked up and said, "You can sleep here tonight if you like. I'll be going home soon, but you can stay. The security man knows me." He looked around. "I don't want to inconvenience." "You're not," she said. "It's okay." He nodded slowly. When she left that night, she looked back once at him from the door. "See you tomorrow, Mr. Diolu," she said, smiling again. And with that, she disappeared into the rain. For the first time in weeks, Adeolua didn't feel like a ghost. He didn't feel like a target, or a wallet, or a project. He just felt seen. And in a tailor's shop hidden behind the noise of Lagos, something began to change inside him. Not because someone knew his name, but because someone chose to be kind when they had no reason to be. The next morning, Lagos roared back to life like it always did. Traders shouted. Danfo conductors banged their fists against bus doors, calling out routes in rapid Yoruba. Generators coughed and rattled into motion. People moved with urgency like the entire city was running late for something. But in a small tailor shop tucked between a barbing salon and a provisions kiosk in Surulere, the world moved slower. Adeolua woke up early. The fabric Temilade had folded the night before still lay neatly on the work table. He stood, stretched, and rolled the stiffness out of his back. The small stool he slept on hadn't been kind to his spine, but strangely, he felt more rested than he had in weeks. As the morning sun crept in through the window slats, he quietly swept the floor, arranged the scattered threads, and placed all the wrappers in a neat pile. When Temilade arrived an hour later, holding a flask of tea and a small transparent bag with bread, she paused at the doorway and smiled. "You cleaned?" she asked. He shrugged, brushing invisible dust off his shirt. "I had time." She handed him the flask. "Next time, tell me, I'll bring more bread." From that day on, a rhythm began between them. Every morning, Temilade would arrive with that same warm flask and a new outfit to sew, and Adeolua, still Deolu to her, would help. He swept, he ran errands, he delivered clothes to customers around the area. When the power went off, he helped start the gin. When her bobbin thread ran out, he fetched replacements from the roadside sewing supply boys. They became a team. An odd one, but a team all the same. Temilade never treated him like a nuisance. Not once did she act like she was doing him a favor. She spoke to him like an equal, trusted him to handle money, trusted him to speak to customers, trusted him, period. One afternoon, while folding a customer's IRO and buba, he asked her, "You do all this alone?" She nodded, not looking up. "Since I was 17. Lost my parents early, learned how to sew from my auntie in Ibadan." "You teach and sew?" She chuckled, brushing chalk lines across the fabric. "Children in the morning, fabrics in the evening, two sides of the same coin." He watched her, the way she moved, fast, precise, confident. No wasted energy. She handled scissors like a chef with a blade. She pinched fabric corners and smoothed them like she was tucking a baby into bed. "So when do you rest?" he asked. She looked up, grinning. "Rest? In Lagos?" They both laughed. It became their thing, laughing. They laughed at torn zippers, at customers who came with ridiculous measurements, at the neighbor's parrot that mimicked curses from the next compound. Sometimes between measuring and stitching, they'd sit and talk. About books, about childhood, about the funny ways Lagosians crossed the road like they had 9 lives. But never about who he really was. She didn't ask where he came from or what he did before. She never pried, and he didn't offer, because for once in his life, Adeolua was enjoying the freedom of being unknown. One rainy Tuesday, after a long day of sewing and delivering clothes in the muddy streets, they sat together sharing puff-puff and soft drinks. Timilade leaned back on her stool and sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough." "What do you mean?" he asked. "All this work, all this hustle, but I still live in a one-room apartment, still jump buses, still save every naira just to buy thread and fabric." He nodded slowly. "But look at what you're building, a life, with dignity." She smiled, tired but grateful, "I guess." He looked at her then. Really looked. She had a strength he'd never seen in the women from his past life. Her hands were rough from hard work but gentle. Her face didn't need makeup to shine, and her heart, that was the real diamond. He wanted to say something, anything, to show her that she was doing more than enough, that her kindness, her humility, her quiet resilience had already changed someone's life. But instead, he just said, "You inspire me, Timmy." She looked at him surprised. "Why? You just do." They sat in silence after that, comfortable, easy. That night, as she locked up the shop and waved goodbye, Adeolua lingered outside longer than usual. He looked up at the sky, clear this time, no rain, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something that wasn't pain or frustration. He felt hope. Maybe this shop wasn't just a sewing space, eh? Maybe it was the beginning of something neither of them expected. Not love, not yet, but something true. And it all started with a simple bowl of rice and beans on a rainy evening. It started with a sigh. A long, drawn-out sigh from Temilade as she sat in the shop one Thursday afternoon, her measuring tape still hanging around her neck. Adeolua glanced up from where he was arranging folded wrappers. "You okay?" She didn't answer at first. She just stared at her phone like it had just insulted her. Then she looked up, biting her lower lip. "My mum's 50th is this weekend." He smiled. "That's a good thing now. Big milestone." She nodded slowly. "Yes, but it also means family." "Ah." That explained the sigh. Temilade rubbed her forehead and let out another breath. "There's going to be a big party. Everyone will be there. My aunties, uncles, cousins, people I haven't seen in years." "And that's a bad thing?" She hesitated. "They'll ask questions." He raised an eyebrow. "What kind of questions?" She dropped her phone on the table like it was suddenly too heavy. "When are you getting married, Timmy? Why are you still single? Are you hiding someone? What happened to G-Day?" He chuckled. "Yida?" She rolled her eyes. "My ex. Tall, loud, and full of himself. Works in banking now, apparently. My sister invited him to the party." "Oof?" "Exactly." She looked up at him. "They already think I'm wasting my life sewing clothes and teaching in a nursery school. If I show up alone again..." She trailed off. Then quietly, almost shyly, she said, "Will you come with me?" He blinked. Me? She nodded slowly. As my fiancé. Adeolua's mouth opened a little. You want me to pretend? She looked embarrassed. I know it's silly, but I'd rather go with someone I'm comfortable around than go through another weekend of pitying looks and matchmaking attempts. He stared at her for a moment. Then he smiled. I'll do it. Temelade let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Really? Sure. I'm good at pretending, remember? He said with a grin. She laughed. Just don't overdo it. You're supposed to be broke, not James Bond. They left for Ibadan early Saturday morning. Temelade wore a simple Ankara gown with a light shawl around her shoulders. Adeolua kept it low-key, a plain button-up shirt, dark trousers, and freshly polished slippers. He'd trimmed his beard a little and combed his hair, just enough to not look like someone sleeping under a bridge. Their arrival at the family compound was like walking into a festival. Music blasted from speakers. Children ran around with balloons. Women stirred giant pots of jollof rice over open flames. The scent of grilled meat filled the air. Plastic chairs dotted the yard, drinks in coolers, loud laughter everywhere. As soon as they stepped in, a woman in a bright green lace outfit turned sharply. Temelade? Temi froze. Sister Bisi, she muttered. Bisi strode over like she was walking a runway. Her makeup was perfect. Gold earrings dangled from her ears. She eyed Adeolua from head to toe, then back again. This is him? She asked, folding her arms. Temi linked her arm with his. Yes, this is Deolu. Bisi didn't smile. She scoffed. You couldn't find someone with better packaging? Adeolua smiled politely. Nice to meet you. She ignored him and turned back to Temi. Mummy's waiting, and Jide is already inside. The name sent a ripple through the pit of Temi's stomach, but she nodded and walked on, pulling Adeolua gently along. Inside the house, the decorations were lovely. Purple and gold fabric on the walls, framed pictures of Mama at different stages of her life, and enough food to feed a football team. Then came Jide, tall, dark, loud. He wore a designer shirt with a banking logo subtly embroidered on the chest and sunglasses inside the house. He greeted everyone with exaggerated handshakes and laughter. When he saw Temilade, he gave her a long, lingering hug. Temi, baby, he said, flashing a fake smile. You're glowing, and you brought someone? Temi nodded, a little tense. Yes, this is Deolu, my fiancé. Jide's eyes flicked toward Adeolua's quiet clothes and calm expression. Then he laughed. Loud, too loud. Wow, you really went for something different. Adeolua said nothing. Temi's jaw tightened. From SUV to bicycle, Jide said with a wink. But hey, love is love, right? Before Temi could clap back, their mother appeared, graceful, in a gold IRO and buba, with a coral bead necklace and a wide, welcoming smile. My daughter, she said, embracing Temi tightly. You came. I wouldn't miss it, Ma. Her mother turned to Adeolua. And this must be the man we've been waiting to meet. Adeolua bowed respectfully. Yes, Ma, Deolu. She nodded, eyes sharp. What do you do? He hesitated. Small jobs here and there. She raised an eyebrow. Like? Odd jobs. I'm still finding my feet. She didn't hide her displeasure. No car? No house? No land? She asked bluntly. Mummy? Temi started. I'm just asking, she said, cutting her off. You're my daughter. I want to be sure. Adeolua smiled softly. I understand, Ma, and I respect that. Later that night, after the party had ended and the crowd had thinned, Temilade sat on a bench outside, the sound of crickets in the distance. Adeolua joined her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "I'm sorry about today." "Don't be. I've heard worse." She looked at him. "You handled it well." He smiled faintly. "You made me feel like I belonged." She stared at him. "You do?" And for the first time, he believed her. Even in his worn shirt and dusty slippers, she meant it. And that meant everything. By Sunday morning, the sun over Ibadan had softened into a golden haze. The compound was quieter now, the music turned down, the aroma of fried plantain floating lazily through the air. Most of the guests had either returned to their hotels or were fast asleep from the night before. But Adeolua was already awake. He sat outside on a wooden stool near the small garden at the back of the house. Chickens scratched at the dirt nearby. His slippers were still dusty from the day before, but he didn't mind. His thoughts were louder than the birds chirping in the trees above. Temilade's mother's words echoed in his ears. "No job, no land, no car. How will you take care of my daughter?" She had said it so plainly, without malice, but also without faith. It wasn't the insult that stung. It was the reminder that no matter how kind or humble he became, people still measured worth with what a man owned, not who he was. And Jeed, that one hadn't changed a bit. Still loud, still full of himself, still trying to prove something. What made it worse? Everyone still believed the surprise gift from last night. Those cases of wine, the DJ and the decorator who magically showed up were from Jide. Not one person even suspected Deolu. And maybe that was for the best. But Adeolua had one more surprise. Before anyone else stirred, he made a quiet call to Morinike. "Yes, sir?" She answered groggily. "I need a new car delivered today," he said, "preferably a black Corolla. Nothing too flashy, just clean, respectable." "Whose name should I register it under?" "Leave it unsigned." She paused. "And the cash gift?" "In 2 million in cash. Place it in a white envelope." "Do I include a note?" "No note, no name." "Understood." He ended the call and looked around the compound. Kids had begun peeking out from the windows. The cook stirred a pot inside the kitchen. It was almost time. 2 hours later, a soft commotion began at the gate. A sleek black car, new, gleaming, rolled slowly into the compound. Behind it, a courier van parked quietly. A well-dressed man stepped out holding a red ribbon and a thick white envelope. The driver asked for Madame Titi, Temilade's mother. She stepped outside confused, drying her hands with a towel. She looked at the car, then at the envelope. "For me?" The courier bowed politely. "From someone who wanted to honor your 50th in a special way." She blinked. "Who?" "No name," the man said. "But he said you'd understand." By now the noise had gathered a crowd. Aunties, cousins, neighbors, everyone wanted to see. Someone pointed at Jeed, standing in the corner with his hands in his pockets, looking just as surprised as everyone else. Jide, you're too much old," one uncle shouted. Another woman clapped. "This one a real man. Not talk, but action." Jeed smiled awkwardly at first, then like a man who had been given permission by fate, he raised his shoulders and said, "It's nothing really, I just wanted to do something meaningful." People cheered. Someone sprayed him with malt. Temilade was standing beside her mother, equally stunned. "You did this?" she asked Jeed directly. Jeed laughed and scratched his head. "Well, I mean, yeah." Adeolua watched from the back, silent, his arms folded across his chest, his face unreadable. He could have stepped forward. He could have said it was me. But he didn't. Because this wasn't about proving anything. It was about Timmy. And if seeing her mother smile, even for the wrong reason, brought Timmy peace, then that was enough for him. Later that day, when the compound quieted again and the gossip faded, Timmy came to find him. He was seated in the small corridor, sipping gari from a plastic cup. "Are you okay?" she asked. He looked up. "Yeah, why? You've been quiet all day." He smiled faintly. "Just tired." She sat beside him. "I really appreciate you coming with me." He looked at her. "I meant what I said. Being here wasn't a chore." She smiled. Then her expression shifted. "Do you think I made a mistake?" she asked softly. "What do you mean?" "Bringing you. Asking you to pretend. I mean, my family wasn't exactly kind to you." He looked at her, heart swelling. "You weren't pretending," he said. "You stood by me like it was real." She blinked. It felt real. They sat in silence, both of them unsure how to explain the thing that was growing between them. Soft, slow, sacred. Before they left Ibadan the next morning, Temilade hugged her mother tightly. Madame Titi held on to her a little longer than usual. "Next time," she whispered, "come home with a man who has direction." Timmy pulled back, lips tight. "I did," she said quietly. "You just didn't look deep enough." As they got on the bus back to Lagos, Adeoluwa looked at her from the window seat. "You all right?" She nodded. "Let's just go home." He smiled. "Home?" She chuckled. "The shop." And for the first time since he began this journey, Adeoluwa realized something strange. The little tailor shop in Surulere had started to feel more like home than all the mansions in Ikoyi ever had. It was a bright Sunday afternoon, the kind where Lagos skies looked like heaven had just been cleaned. Temilade stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the sleeves of her soft peach gown. It wasn't expensive. She'd sewn it herself using leftover fabric from a customer's order. But it looked elegant, and more importantly, it felt like her. Adeoluwa watched her from the shop doorway, wiping his hands with a rag after lifting fabric boxes. "You sure you want to go to this thing?" he asked. She turned slightly. "Juliet invited me personally. We were in the same class at university. She's just bought a house in Lekki Phase 2. "That's big," he said. "She insisted I bring Mama," Timmy said, air quoting with a small smile. "I figured. I have one now, right?" Adeoluwa raised an eyebrow. "Do I qualify?" She gave him a soft look. "If it's okay with you, I'd like to show you off, even if they don't understand." He grinned. "Then let's go." The ride to Lekki was long, hot, and full of traffic, but Temilade didn't complain once. They squeezed into a bus, then walked the final 10 minutes from the estate gate. When they arrived, Juliet's house stood tall, new, and shining with a fresh coat of white paint. The air smelled of grilled chicken and car polish. Music thumped from Bluetooth speakers and laughter floated from the backyard. Inside, the house looked like something out of a furniture catalog. Gold lighting, marble floors, white sofas. Guests strolled around in heels and perfume. Women wore lace and satin. The men boasted designer belts and loafers that had never touched sand. As Temilade and Adeoluwa stepped in, the room quieted for just a second, long enough for glances to be exchanged, noses to wrinkle, eyebrows to rise. "Is that Temi?" Someone whispered. "She used to be the best student in our class, right?" "Guess brains don't always equal success." Timolade held Adeolua's hand tighter. Juliet, tall and stylish in a bodycon dress, greeted them with a plastic smile. "Temmie, long time." "Congrats on the new place," Temmie said warmly. Juliet's eyes scanned Adeolua quickly. "And this is my fiancé, Deolu," Temmie said proudly. Juliet didn't respond. She just smiled wider, too wide. The whispers picked up again behind them. "Fiancé? Wearing slippers? Looks like he works in generator repair." One guy chuckled loudly. "Babe, be careful with your purse, oh. That man looks like he came from under the bridge." Timolade's jaw clenched, but she didn't say anything. Yet. Juliet waved over a security guard. "Please help these guests to the backyard seating it's at. More casual out there." Adeolua looked at Temmie. She was still smiling, but he could see her fingers tighten around her purse. The backyard had plastic chairs arranged near the grill. A few less well-dressed guests sat there. Away from the marble and wine-glass crowd inside, Adeolua didn't mind. He was used to sitting outside. But Temmie? She was boiling inside. They sat down quietly, trying to ignore the occasional stares and laughter from the kitchen window. Then a woman walked past and said loud enough to be heard, "Some people just like to carry their embarrassment around proudly. If your man can't afford small shoe, why bring him here?" That was the last straw. Timolade stood. Her chair scraped loudly against the tiles. She turned to face the living room, voice steady but clear. "Excuse me." The music paused slightly as people looked up. "I just want to say, if your idea of class is mocking people who dress simply, then I don't want to be part of your gathering." Whispers swept the room like a gust of wind. She continued, "Deolu is a good man. He's kind, respectful, hardworking, and doesn't owe anyone fake appearances. If you can't see past his slippers, that's your limitation, not his." Someone laughed nervously. "Temmie, relax." "No," she said firmly. "I came here thinking I'd celebrate an old friend's success. Instead, I walked into a fashion competition laced with gossip." She looked at Juliet. "You may have a beautiful house, Juliet, but class isn't furniture and spotlights, it's how you treat people." Then she turned, took Adeolua's hand, and said softly, "Let's go." He followed her, head held high, not saying a word. As they stepped outside into the warm Lagos sun, she exhaled slowly. "I'm sorry," she said, voice trembling. He stopped her. "Don't be." "But they insulted you. Because of me." He smiled. "They don't matter." She looked at him, eyes wet. "I just couldn't let them treat you like that." "You didn't have to say anything," he whispered, "but I wanted to." And just like that, something shifted between them. Stronger than kindness, deeper than charity. Loyalty. As they walked down the estate street, back toward the bus stop, head still turning behind them, Timolade didn't feel embarrassed. She felt free, because for the first time she'd chosen love over image, heart over hype, dignity over designer labels. And Adeolua? He held her hand like it was the only thing left holding his world together. Because in her eyes, he was finally enough. They were just a few steps from the estate gate when it happened. Timolade and Adeolua walked side by side in silence, the tension of the last hour clinging to them like humidity in the air. Her jaw was set, her fists still clenched from holding back tears. His expression was calm, but his silence was heavy, measured, like he was preparing for something. Suddenly, the ground began to hum. It started as a distant rumble. Then headlights flared at the far end of the street. Black SUVs. 3 of them. polished, gleaming, moving in slow formation. The same crowd that had laughed at Adeolua minutes ago turned to look. Phones came out. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the security men by the gate stood straighter. The cars stopped just ahead of Temi and Adeolua. Doors opened in near-perfect sync. From the middle SUV, Morenike stepped out, dressed in sharp corporate black and heels that clicked authoritatively on the pavement. She walked up to Adeolua with purpose, nodded slightly, and said, "Sir, everything is in place." Gasps swept the crowd like a breeze. "Wait, sir, who's she talking to?" Before anyone could ask further, 2 more bodyguards stepped out, their suits clean, their movements silent. Juliet, standing near the porch, whispered, "Is this a film?" Someone else whispered louder, "Wait, he looks familiar. Is that not?" Adeolua turned to Temilad. Her face was blank. He gently released her hand and took 2 quiet steps forward. The entire estate, it seemed, leaned in at once. Then he reached into his back pocket and brought out a folded navy blue document wallet. He opened it slowly, hands steady. "My name," he began, voice deep but calm, "is Adeolua Adetayo." Silence. "I am the CEO of Adetayo Conglomerate, an only son of Chief and Madam Adetayo." The weight of his words hit the crowd like thunder. Mouths dropped open, eyebrows shot skyward. Juliet took a step back, visibly shaken. People began typing furiously on their phones. Photos surfaced instantly. Adeolua in suits, speaking at conferences, shaking hands with governors, cutting ribbons at charity galas. "No way!" someone shouted. "This is the same guy that wore slippers to the housewarming." One man dropped his bottle of malt. A woman near the fence let out a small scream. Temilade stood frozen, her eyes wide, her breathing shallow. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time, and in a way she was. Adeolua walked slowly back toward her. His eyes never left hers. The street had gone quiet. Even the music from inside Juliet's house had stopped. He stopped in front of her and knelt. The gasp that followed could have emptied the sky. From inside his inner pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. A diamond ring sparkled inside, glowing under the afternoon sun like a quiet promise. "Temilade," he said, voice shaking slightly. "When I met you, you thought I had nothing. And still, you gave me food. You gave me shelter. You gave me your trust." Tears began to well in her eyes. "You didn't ask for money. You didn't take pictures. You didn't laugh when I had holes in my slippers. You just cared." He paused, voice thick with emotion. "You made me believe again. In love, in kindness, in people. And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never lack anything again. Not money, not peace, not love." He held out the ring. "Will you marry me?" Temilade's lips trembled. Her legs almost gave way. She covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by the moment. The stares, the truth, the love. And then she nodded. Once, twice. Then a whisper. "Yes." The crowd erupted. Cheers! Applause! Some people even screamed. Others clapped with tears in their eyes. "Juliet!" She stood back, humiliated beyond words, unable to hide the burning on her face. A young man live-streamed it online. Lagos housewarming gone viral. Beggar turns billionaire CEO. #Adetayo revealed. Morenike smiled faintly from the side. The bodyguards stayed still, professional, but even they couldn't hide the hint of pride in their eyes. Adeolua stood, slipped the ring on Temi's finger, and pulled her into a hug. She held on to him like she'd fall without him. And all around them, the laughter, the scorn, the whispers faded, because in that moment, it was just the two of them. A man who hid his crown, and a woman who saw the king before he ever wore it. The news broke faster than fire on dry grass. Before nightfall, blogs had headlines like, "Wow, from tailor's shop to billionaire's heart, Adeoluwa Adetayo's surprise proposal. Who is Temilade, the seamstress who stole Nigeria's most eligible bachelor?" Social media exploded. Some praised her humility. Others speculated she was a gold digger who played the game well. Videos from the Lekki housewarming went viral, especially the moment he knelt down. But not everyone was clapping. Far away, in a quiet, glass-walled mansion in Ikoyi, Chief Adetayo sat in his study, reading the headlines on his iPad with pursed lips. His wife, Madam Adetayo, paced behind him, arms folded tightly, every step louder than the last. "She sews clothes," she said sharply. "Clothes, Adetayo?" "She's kind," the chief said calmly. "She's poor," Madame hissed. "She lives in Surulere and teaches nursery children. We've spent decades building this empire, and your son wants to throw it away. For what? Love?" He didn't respond. She turned to him, eyes blazing. "We were finalizing the highway deal with the Senate president. You know what that means. That contract alone is worth over $20 billion. Still, silence. She banged the table. "Adeoluwa must end this nonsense immediately. He will marry Teniola. He will protect this family's legacy." The next day, Adeoluwa stood before them, freshly shaven, dressed simply but neatly. No bodyguards, no flash, just a son standing in front of his parents, ready for war. "You've been busy," his father said. "I found peace," Adeoluwa replied. His mother stepped forward. "Call her and tell her it's over." "No." "You're the heir," she pressed. "You know what's at stake." "I know," he said. "I'm the one who built half of our company's digital division. I sat in boardrooms before I turned 25. I grew the business when you both were abroad, and now that I've found someone who gives me peace, you want to trade her for strategy." "Exactly," Madame said, "because love is temporary. Legacy is forever. I'd rather build a new legacy with a woman who loves me than inherit one built on lies and politics." His father spoke softly. "Son, you won't just lose money, you'll lose everything. Your board seat, your shares, even the family name." I'll start again. "Adeoluwa." "I'm not changing my mind," he said, voice like iron. Silence filled the air. Then Madam Adetayo dropped a final blow. "If you walk out of this house and stay with that girl, you are no longer an Adetayo." He stared at them for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away. By evening, he returned to the shop in Surulere, but it was empty. Temilady's sewing machine sat still, her fabric rolls untouched. The bulb dangled quietly from the ceiling. The room felt hollow, as if it had been holding its breath. On the table he found a note, folded neatly, written in her careful handwriting. "I love you, Adeoluwa, but I won't let you lose everything because of me. You were born to soar. I refuse to be the reason you fall. I'm sorry." He read it once, then again, then again. His knees buckled, and he sat on the floor, heart in his throat. He had given up the world. But she had given him up thinking it would save him. And just like that, she was gone. No address, no clue, no way to reach her. The shop that once felt like home now echoed with silence. And in that silence, Adeoluwa felt what no fortune, no boardroom, no company could ever replace. He had lost her, not to money, not to pride, but to sacrifice, and maybe That was the deepest kind of love there was. The town was quiet, not silent, no, but the kind of quiet that wrapped around you like a warm wrapper on a cold Harmattan morning. Birds chirped softly from trees that lined the dusty road, and in the distance you could hear children laughing, running barefoot through narrow paths between small bungalows and scattered palm trees. This was Igboy, a quiet community near EPE, far from the noise and glitter of Lagos Island, and it was here that Temilade found peace. She had arrived 2 weeks after leaving Lagos, alone, heartbroken, carrying only a small bag and a secret that would soon grow into a visible bump. She didn't tell anyone what had happened. She simply asked around for a place to stay, and by a stroke of kindness, a retired midwife took her in, a gentle woman named Mama Ronke, who had a spare room and a soft voice that didn't pry. Each morning, Temilade walked to the community school down the road where she taught the youngest children. Nursery level, the only class with small chairs and wobbly chalk drawings on the board. She loved them. They called her Auntie Timmy and ran to her like bees to hibiscus flowers. In the afternoons, she volunteered at the local clinic. She swept floors. She folded gauze. She read stories to tired mothers in waiting rooms and comforted young girls who were afraid of injections. The villagers didn't ask about her past. They just saw her heart. And for Temilade, that was enough. But every night as she lay on her mattress under the ceiling fan, her hand resting protectively on her slowly growing belly, she whispered to her unborn child, "Your daddy is the kindest man I know." She hadn't told him. She couldn't. If she did, he might come looking for her again. He might give up more. And she'd already taken too much. So she kept her distance, until the day fate decided to close the distance for her. It was a warm Saturday morning, the kind where the sky looked like it had been brushed with blue paint and softened with clouds. The clinic was hosting a charity wellness event, blood pressure checks, free deworming for children, basic consultations, all sponsored by a health foundation. Temilade wore a modest blouse over her small bump and helped direct villagers from one table to the next. She offered warm smiles, handed out bottled water, and tied back her hair with a soft scarf. She looked tired but peaceful. In that same moment, a sleek black SUV rolled into the compound. Inside it sat Madame Adebayo, lips pursed, sunglasses covering her eyes. She had been invited by the Health Foundation to speak about women's health in underserved communities. It was a routine appearance, one she didn't take seriously, until her eyes caught a figure under the clinic's canopy. At first she didn't believe it. Then the woman turned, and the world seemed to still. Temilade. Hair pulled back, barefaced, smiling at a crying child she held in her arms. Her clothes were simple, her shoes were dusty, but there was something about her presence that couldn't be ignored. Soft, radiant, like peace was her perfume. Madame Adebayo watched, frozen. As she stepped out of the SUV, her eyes trailed slowly to Temilade's midsection. The bump, small, but unmistakable. A quiet gasp left her mouth. She turned to one of the nurses nearby. Who is that young woman?" The nurse smiled. "That's Auntie Timmy. She's an angel. She teaches our children and volunteers here every day. Moved here not too long ago." "She's pregnant?" The nurse nodded. "Yes, she never complains. Just helps and smiles. We love her." Madame Adebayo turned away slightly, her throat tightening. In her mind, she saw all the things she had once said. She sews clothes. She's not from our world. If you walk out for her, you're no longer an Aditayo. And yet here this same woman was, giving, teaching, healing, with no camera watching, no blog following, just her heart. For the first time in years, Madame Aditayo felt her pride melt into something strange and unfamiliar. Regret. She sat quietly at the edge of the event, under a tree, her gaze never leaving Temilade. She watched as Temi handed out vitamins to mothers, laughed with the children, and helped a nurse hold a fussy baby. She watched how others trusted her, how she carried herself, how she glowed. And in that moment, it no longer mattered that Temile didn't have a family name or a designer bag. She had something far rarer, character. As the sun began to set and the event wrapped up, Madame Aditayo stood and walked slowly to her car. She didn't call out to Temilade. She wasn't ready. Not yet. But she would be. Because the girl she once rejected had now shown her what true nobility looked like. Not through money, not through status, but through kindness. And the quiet strength of a woman who walked away so the man she loved wouldn't lose everything. Madame Aditayo sat in the back seat, her voice low. Take me home. But her heart stayed behind, with the girl who was carrying her grandchild. The rain had just stopped in Lagos, and the streets glistened like mirrors beneath the late afternoon sun. At the Aditayo mansion in Ikoyi, however, the air felt different, lighter, warmer, like the wind itself had been waiting for something to shift. Inside, Madame Aditayo sat in the drawing room. No makeup, no jewelry, just a soft wrapper tied around her waist and a cup of cold tea in her hand. Her eyes were on the floor, but her mind was far away, still in that small town clinic in Igboy, where she had seen the woman who once challenged everything she believed about class, status, and worth. She had told no one what she saw, but something in her heart had already changed. That evening, she called Morenike. I need your help, she said softly. Morenike was surprised. Yes, ma? Find Temilade, quietly. Please. 2 days later, Adeolua stood outside the same tailor shop in Surulere, his heart beating harder than it had the day he gave up everything. Morenike had handed him a small paper with the address. It was smudged from the sweat of his palms, but he held it like it was gold. As he walked into Igboy, the dusty wind of the town greeted him like an old friend. Children ran past him, waving, unaware they were brushing shoulders with a billionaire prince. At the clinic's gate, he paused. Then he saw her. Temilade was sitting on a wooden bench under a mango tree, holding a small girl in her arms, reading softly from a picture book. Her baby bump was more obvious now, peeking out from beneath her plain maternity gown. He took one step, then another, and as if she sensed it, she looked up, but their eyes locked. Temilade gasped softly. The book slid from her lap. She stood slowly, hands over her belly. He didn't speak. She didn't speak. Then finally, voice trembling, she whispered, You came? His reply cracked through the silence like thunder and prayer combined. I never stopped looking. She ran into his arms, and he held her like his whole world had come back together. She sobbed into his chest. He buried his face in her neck. I'm sorry, she whispered over and over. I didn't want to ruin your future. He pulled back, cupped her face gently. You are my future, Temi. Nothing else matters. Tears flowed freely from them, from Mama Ronke watching quietly from the clinic window, even from one of the nurses who pretended to sweep the corridor. Later that night, Adeolua knelt by her mattress and placed his head on her belly. "I miss both of you," he said softly. The baby kicked once. They laughed through tears. The wedding was held 1 month later, not in a giant hall or a foreign destination, but in the garden of the Adetayo mansion. Under soft white canopies, surrounded by flowers and golden lanterns, a small gathering of people came together to witness something rare: redemption. The guest list wasn't made of politicians or socialites. It was a mix of people from both their world: tailors from Surulere, community teachers from Igboy, CEOs, mentors, even neighborhood children. Everyone came dressed simply but beautifully, as if the theme was grace. Madame Adetayo stood at the entrance in a sky blue lace dress. Her eyes were red, not from makeup, but from something far more honest. When Temilade arrived, wearing a gown she stitched with her own hands, the entire garden went silent. She didn't need diamonds. She didn't need a crown. She was royalty. She walked down the aisle slowly, arm in arm with Mama Ronke, her smile glowing beneath a veil of tears and sunlight. At the altar, Adeolua stood waiting, heart wide open, eyes never leaving hers. The priest smiled. "Do you, Prince Adeolua Adetayo, take this woman who gave you rice in the rain and saw you when you had nothing as your wife?" "I do," he said, voice shaking with love. "And do you, Temilade, take this man, not for his title or riches, but for the heart he carries within him?" "I do," she whispered, steady as stone. When the priest said, "You may now kiss the bride," the doves were released into the air, and the entire garden erupted in applause. Morenike cried behind her sunglasses. Chief Adetayo clapped slowly, then faster. "Madame Adetayo?" She walked up to Temilade after the ceremony, took both her hands, and said just 4 words. "I was wrong. Forgive me." Temilade smiled and hugged her without hesitation. That night, under fairy lights and a sky full of stars, the newlyweds danced to soft highlife music, while their guests laughed, ate, and danced around them. And as Adeolua held his bride close, he whispered into her ear, "You saw me when I was nobody, and loved me like I was everything." Temilade smiled, leaning into him. "And now," she replied, "we build everything together." And they did. From that day forward, as husband and wife, as parents, as partners, not just in wealth, but in truth, love, and the kind of peace that no crown could ever buy.